Welcome to our live stream today. We are joined with Delaware Master Naturalist, Mckay Jenkins. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Just a little bit about Mckay. He has been writing and teaching about the environment and social justice for 30 years. He's written books featuring crucially important environmental and historical topics, which we'll get into in this live stream. Holds degrees from Amherst, Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, and Princeton. He's got his PhD in English from there. He's written for newspapers, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Outside, Orion, New Republic, many other publications. Currently the Cornelius Tomlin Professor of English, the Journalism and Environmental Humanities at the University of Delaware, and he has won the University Excellence in Teaching Award and the College of Arts and Science Excellence in Teaching Award. So a lot of accomplishments that we're really excited to bring your knowledge and your expertise here. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And if you're just joining, I'm Camille. I'm part of the outreach with Cedar Club, and we'll just be learning more about Mckay Jenkins and his work that he's been doing with Master Naturalist. So Mckay, you're teaching a class called Master Naturalist with the University of Delaware and the Delaware Nature Society. So how did this get started here in Delaware, and where did this idea come from?
Thank you, Camille. So the Master Naturalist program has been sort of officially present in the state of Delaware for just about a year. We taught our very first class 2 days before everything shut down last March. So we're just about at 1 year. There are Master Naturalist programs in states all around the country. Texas has the oldest one. I think it's been around for 20 years. California has a big one with multiple opportunities to take the course. I live in Baltimore. I've been teaching at the university for 25 years, but I live in Baltimore, and I actually got certified as a Master Naturalist in the state of Maryland. And when I had such a positive experience with that, I came and looked around at Delaware and realized the state did not yet have a program like this. It has a Master Gardener program, but it did not have a Master Naturalist program. So I started, working my networks of people that I work with, colleagues at the university, but also in the nonprofit nature community in the state, mostly at the Delaware Nature Society, and started holding some meetings with, scientists and environmental educators, both at Delaware and DNS. And we thought it would be a cool idea to put all this together. So this has been about 2.5 years in the making. We now have a faculty that is made up of UD professors of everything from watershed ecology to native plants, invasive plants, climate science, all that sort of stuff. Then DNS has people that are experts in birds and in geology, all kinds of different subfields within the natural history world. And the idea here is that you take the course. It takes 40 hours of classroom training, and then you become a Master Naturalist and or committed to some 40 hours of volunteer work that can range from everything from like planting trees to removing invasives to doing environmental education, really whatever you want to do. People who are very physically active, as I have been. I've spent the last couple of years doing a tremendous amount of tree planting, reforestation work, that sort of thing. People who are less physically inclined can do things like work in nature centers. They can do administrative work. They can help, teach kids about environmental awareness and things like that. There's really just about anything that you feel like doing in the environmental education or restoration field. This training will get you ready to go. So the idea here is to train. We started out thinking we were going to do 25 a year. We're already up to close to 100 a year. It's been a very, very popular program. We're starting to expand the number of times we teach it. And we're beginning to now think about offering it as a 4-credit course for future environmental education teachers, or even K through 12 teachers at the university. So there are all kinds of opportunities to take it, whether you're a student, whether you're an adult, whether you're retired, it doesn't matter. You can find a way to take it. So that's kind of a short answer to that question. But it really, like, since I kind of started the ball rolling and I was trained in Maryland, the program in Delaware bears a lot of similarities to the Maryland program, which is really quite extraordinary. I will tell you, just as an aside, that the Texas program, which has been around for 20 years, they have trained so many people that they have quantified how much volunteer work has been done by all the volunteers, and they have something like 1.2 million hours of volunteer environmental work that has come just from this Master Naturalist training. So it's really been quite extraordinary.
That is incredible. That sounds like a great collaborative effort on all fronts, from institutions to people who might have not known so much about it before and are just getting involved.
Well, and if you just think in the first year, I mean, let's say that we trained 25 in the spring, and I think we've trained, I don't know, we're up to like another 100, let's say. So let's just say we have 150 Master Naturalists by the time the spring rolls around. You can multiply 150 times 40 hours of work, and you can already see that we're starting to accumulate a certain, a critical mass of trained people that can go out and help restore a lot of the various ecosystems that have been damaged over the years in the state of Delaware. So, and the other good thing is that we're still teaching it online. The Maryland program was shut down after COVID. They really didn't want to try to take this on, and because we were starting it last spring and had planned to start it before COVID hit, we just decided to go ahead and teach it, and which means a lot more people can take it online. They can take the coursework online and then do some of the field work on field trips on the weekends, outside, masked up, socially distanced, all that. But we're fully functioning now, even though COVID is here.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're still able to do that great work. We do have a question from Judy Winters. You had mentioned that Delaware has a Master Gardener certification, but what is the difference between a Master Gardener and Naturalist?
Well, the Master Gardener program, anybody who's been through that or knows people who have, has always, it's got a very long and storied history for training people in gardening practices and gardening science and landscaping. And it's been a fabulous program. It's a very popular one all around the country. The Master Naturalist thing has a lot in common in terms of like learning about plants, but it would be much more focused on ecological restoration. So you will not just learn how to plant, a pretty garden in your backyard. You would focus very specifically on why it would be useful to plant native plants and rip out invasive plants. And then also, it's not just about your garden. It's very much about tending to and repairing public land. So like a lot of people, for example, are going into places like White Clay Creek, and they notice that there's a tremendous invasive vine problem. So master gardeners would not necessarily worry themselves about what's going on in a state park, but Master Naturalists are very specifically trained to go in and see a forest and notice that there's, let's just say, Asian bittersweet or Japanese honeysuckle or whatever the problem is, and go in and be able to recognize it, understand why it needs to come out, pull, and then organize, very large scale, invasive pull volunteer work. I do work, as I mentioned, I live in Baltimore, and I just literally today spent 6 hours in a piece of public land chainsawing dead ash trees that were killed by the emerald ash borer. So as many of you, I'm sure, are aware of that there's a tremendous infestation of this insect called the emerald ash borer that is killing ash trees up and down the East Coast. It's absolutely devastating. And in the city of Baltimore, it's really taken a tremendous toll on our public lands. So with some volunteers, I've been in there trying to get these trees down, cut up, and then remove so that we can replace them with, we've got something on the order of about 3,000 native trees that we're going to replant to basically restore this forest. So that's kind of typical of what a Master Naturalist would do. It's less about gardening and it's more about ecosystem repair and restoration. So you would find other places, for example, that would, you'd have crossover. Like if there's a public or state land, let's say, and they get a grant and they want to restore let's say a monarch butterfly meadow, and it's not just a couple of 100 square feet, maybe it's like an acre of meadow or 5 acres of meadow, and they need a lot of people that have some training in this. Master gardeners would show up and help, and master naturalists would definitely show up and help. So you'd have people that know flowers, but you'd also have people who know ecosystems. They would know what the relationship is between milkweed and monarchs. They would know why it is that you need to clear out, for example, something I work on a lot, this thing called mile a minute. Mile a minute is a really aggressive, invasive plant that comes in and actually can ruin a monarch meadow. Like you can plant milkweed all over the place, and then the mile a minute comes in and takes over the milkweed. So like that monarchs need milkweed, you plant milkweed, and then you've got these invasives that are also hassling the plants, not the butterfly. So the master naturalist training is designed to have you learn about the connections between all kinds of different things out there, and then do your best to intervene in the service of restoration. So that's kind of a long answer to that question. There's definitely overlap, but like master naturalists would not concern themselves. Master gardeners would not be so focused on things like watershed ecology or climate science or geology. I mean, they would have some introduction to it, but we're much broader and much more intentional in terms of turning the training into actual restoration work that is beneficial for the system itself, like the ecological system, but also for public lands, not just for private homes, private yards, that sort of thing. It's very much a public land and restoration project.
Okay. So it sounds like a lot of knowledge regarding connections between all the moving pieces is required.
That's the whole idea. The idea is it's a really deep and broad engagement with the ecological principles. So you're going to look at a piece of land and you're going to notice, first of all, how was that land used? What's the history of it? How damaged is it? In what way is it damaged? Does it need invasive work? Does it need native plant flowers? Does it need native, understory? Does it need native trees? What's the bird life look like? What's the insect life look like? What's the flooding problem? Depending where you are, I've done work in very remote rural places, and I've done work, as I said this morning, in very urban places, and they have entirely different challenges. They're really specific to every situation that you're talking about.
Just knowing, the extensive, valuable knowledge that Master Naturalist can provide. Judy Winters also had a great question. How can my group get connected to Master Naturalist?
That is a good question, Judy. The link that someone put up there that connects you to the cooperative extension site will show you, if you drop down, there's a list of what are called LOPs, local organizing partners. So this is more inside baseball than anybody needs to worry about. But when you set up a statewide program like this, the question has to be, how do you administer it? Like how do you organize the different classes, and how do you attract students, and then how do you assign volunteers? Like if you have 500 people across Delaware that want to do work, how do you organize them? And what we decided to do when we set this program up was to get partners with other nonprofit organizations around the state. So for example, the Delaware Nature Society is a central one. The Delaware Center for the Inland Bays, for example, the Mount Cuba Center, Delaware Wildlands, the Hermitage, Delaware Botanic Gardens. If you look at the website, you'll find different organizations, and all you need to do is contact them, say that you want to sign up under their umbrella with the Master Naturalist program. And then what that means is you get trained just like everybody else, but then you go back to your organizing partner, and you do work, at least the first year you do work for them. So the way it's set up in Maryland is you get trained, let's say at a nature center. The training is all the same, no matter where you are in the state, you're getting the same training. but where you do your training will determine where you provide your initial volunteer work. So if you're at a nature center and they train you, you then owe them 40 hours of work over the next year that could be, again, restoring a meadow for them, or planting trees for them, or teaching little kids for them, or whatever it is. And at least in Maryland, once you're done with that first year, you're then free to do work anywhere you want in the state. Delaware is so small that you can get to wherever you want to work in an hour or so. In Maryland, they've got programs that are on the Eastern Shore. They got programs near Baltimore. They got programs out in the western part of the state, and you want to train your volunteers to know their local place well enough that they can then turn around and offer their volunteer hours where they are. So, in the end, the goal, of course, over years is to train many, many, many hundreds of people in the state, and everybody takes care of their own backyard. Like, you don't need to drive an hour to go find a project to work on. They're going to be projects right where you are. And hopefully, if you live in, Hockessin, and there's a project going on in Lewis, you can go help out if you want, but you want to deal with Hockessin, let the Lewis people deal with Lewis. Like, the idea is to have everybody become much more intimate with where they are, and then contribute their work to the place where they are, where they live. That's the idea. Part of the idea here, I have to say, from my perspective, is that, Americans generally, maybe people all around the world, but certainly in this country, and certainly I've noticed this in Delaware, people have become very detached from their land. We have become a very, very suburban and sort of disconnected culture. And so one of the things that this Master Naturalist program does is it reintroduces people to their land, like to their rivers and their trees and their native birds, and it gets people way back in touch with things that we used to know a whole lot more about. The idea being that the more you know it, the better you know it, the more inclined you will be to take care of it. So if you know what an invasive plant is, and you know what a native tree is, and you walk by a forest and you see all these native trees being destroyed by these invasive vines, maybe you'll be more inclined to actually try to get involved in helping it out. So I see a question from Sandra, who says, when do classes start, or does it matter if the classes are online? Sandra, it's a good question. And I, again, would recommend that you check in with that website, because the course, it's not like a perpetual course. The course does have a beginning moment and an end moment, and you sign up for a particular series of classes. So we just started about 3 weeks ago or so. We started our most recent cohort. There are 3 different sections of 20 people, I think we have, so it's 60 total, and they are all 3 or 4 weeks into their training. So I wish I could tell you when the next one was going to be. It's probably going to be later this spring, depending on how many people sign up. It's become instantly very popular. I'm very pleased to say. When we announced the first session last March, we opened the registration, and it was full in 4 minutes. So that was pretty cool. Then we decided it was so popular that we'd start another program over the summer. That filled up, and then we started one just, like I said, about a month ago. So the next one I don't have a specific date, and you'll have to just check in with the website, or send an email. I mentioned this before, and maybe you can see it in the chat at the top. Blake Moore is the guy who administers the program through the university. And anybody who wants to know anything about it, when the next one is, can just send him an email, and he will set you up. But you can count on, it is frustrating. I remember when I was trying to get trained in Maryland, this is another thing about setting these programs up. Some people, like retirees, for example, would be very happy to go to a class that met for 3 hours on Tuesdays, during the middle of the day. If you are working and you're a teacher, or you're whatever you do for work, you might only be able to do it from 6 till 9 o'clock at night. So you're trying to organize these courses so that as many people can take them as possible. And usually what that means is, alternating maybe fall and spring. Sometimes they meet during the day, sometimes they meet on the weekend, sometimes they meet at night, because you're trying to satisfy as many people as possible. When I was in Maryland, it took me 6 years. What I finally got was there was a semester when I was not teaching at the university on Tuesdays, and I found a course that was, I had to drive half an hour to get to it, but I live in Baltimore. The course was being offered in Columbia, Maryland. I drove down half an hour every Tuesday and sat in a classroom for 6 hours for like 6 straight weeks, and then I was done. I was trained in 6 weeks. Other times it meets, 2 hours on a Tuesday night, and it takes 6 months. So it totally depends on when the course is offered and at what times, and what your station in life is, if you're working full time or if you're not. So my recommendation basically is that you get in touch with Blake Moore and keep an eye on that website. And as we design new sections of the class, it'll be announced and you can sign up if it works for you.
And I'll put that information in the chat here for anyone who might have missed it before.
Yeah, that's the place to go.
Excellent. A little bit more about your involvement with the course. You helped write the book for this class, is that right? How did the process unfold for that?
Thank you. Yeah. So, it's funny because I'm not a scientist. I'm an environmental journalist and environmental literature professor. But what I did bring to it was, a lot of editing experience. I've published 9 books and I've written a whole lot of different stuff. So I decided that one thing I could contribute to it would be to write and edit the book that would go along with this. So there is a book which I strongly recommend. It's, if you take the course, it's required, so you'll get it as part of your tuition. But even if you are not taking the course, I just put it in the chat. It's called the Delaware Naturalist Handbook. It's a 340-page book, beautifully illustrated and lots of great pictures. It has chapters in there on the environmental history of the state. That's the one that I wrote, but it has chapters on insects and birds and climate science and environmental justice, just about anything that you might be interested in, geology, amphibians, you name it. There are 14 different chapters that cover just about everything you could be interested in. So I have to say, I really am quite proud of it. And I think, if it may be so bold, I think it's the best version of its type in the country. I think we now have the best textbook or whatever you say, handbook for the Master Naturalist program as anybody in the country. So it's got great, some of you may know some people like Doug Tallamy, a very well-known UD professor who specializes in native and invasive plants. He's got 2 chapters in the book, for example. So we've got some real heavy hitters that contribute to this project. So that's the book. When you take the course, you get a copy of that with your tuition, and you follow it, chapter by chapter as you're going through the training.
Excellent.
It makes a great gift too, by the way. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. So is this book just about Delaware, or is it more focused or more broad?
It's a good question. I mean, it is definitely, like, certain chapters are very Delaware specific. So like the chapter I wrote on the environmental history of Delaware is definitely specific to Delaware, but you could be in Maine or North Carolina and read the chapter on climate science and it would be, equally relevant. So there are a couple of chapters that are super specific to Delaware, but a whole lot of it, if you're reading a chapter about birds or about native plants, as long as you're on the East Coast or at least in the mid-Atlantic, I strongly think that, Maryland could use this book. They won't, because it's got Delaware in the title, but Maryland could use this book for their Master Naturalist program, no problem. And it would be perfectly suitable. So it's mostly for Delaware, but, a lot of the chapters are true across most East Coast ecosystems.
Excellent. Well, it's got Valentine's Day coming up. If you haven't thought of something yet, this is the book for you.
That's right. That's right.
And we have a question from Facebook here. Once someone completes the course, how does he or she get connected to these types of projects or challenges in the community?
Okay, so we mentioned earlier that the way you sign up for the course is through what we call one of these local organizing partners. So let's just say, for example, that you live somewhat near, I don't know, the Delaware Center for Inland Bays or somewhere near Mount Cuba. You would sign up through them to take the course. And once you're done with the course, you would then return to the place where you signed up. So let's say Mount Cuba, and say, I just got trained. I owe 40 hours of volunteer work. What can I do? And Mount Cuba would tell you. They would say, well, we've got a monarch meadow we want to build. So you can just join in the group. If they don't have anything cooking, which they always do, I mean, everybody's got way more work than they can do, they might farm you out to some other project. There are plenty of projects going on that are always looking for help, but the first place that you end up turning to do this kind of work would be your local organizing partner, the partner that you signed up with to take the course in the first place.
I'm sure this has affected some of the partners just with the pandemic and having social distancing and remote learning. How has that affected the class, and are any field trips or extensions occurring at the moment?
So the coursework is being taught online, which in a way is actually turned out to be a really good thing in terms of being able to deliver, this kind of teaching. Uh, it's made it possible to reach many more people. So like you can teach, for example, if I teach the section on environmental history in Delaware, if I teach it on Zoom, I can teach it to 10 people or 100 people. It makes no difference. So we've been able to get a lot more people trained in the kind of classroom work. The field trips are a little more tricky, but they are happening. So what they've been doing is taking people out, again, masked and outdoors and socially distanced and all that, but they have been able to manage the field trips. Um, as I said before, Maryland was so intimidated by the idea of that they canceled their training. We decided to go ahead and do it anyway, just to make sure that we had small enough numbers on the field trips that it was going to be safe. So the course is continuing. All the classroom work is done online, and then the field trips are still going on, but just in smaller numbers.
Okay, glad to hear it. Great. And if someone wanted to take the course and they get that 4-minute window and get registered, what would the cost of the class be?
The cost is $285. $285 gets you, it's actually an incredible bargain, I have to say, because it gets you 40 hours of classroom work and a copy of the book, which the list price for the book itself is 35 bucks. So, it's the equivalent. I mean, right now we're in conversations with my colleagues at the university about offering this for credit for undergraduates that might, for example, want to be K through 12 teachers and become specialists in environmental education. To take a course like this at the university would cost you the equivalent of a 3-credit course, which is, $3,500 or something like that. So if you take it, just to take it, it costs you 285 bucks, which if you think about $285 divided by 40 hours of classroom work, that's a pretty cheap hourly rate for getting trained by, honestly, like there's some really, really highly regarded people on this faculty. So just for my money, I thought when I took it in Maryland, I thought it was the best money I ever spent. I can't remember getting more for my money than what I learned in the program. So I'm going to just go ahead and be shameless and say that I think it's like one of the best bargains there is. It's a very, very comprehensive course. It's a lot of fun. It's not expensive. And then the work you do once you get out is like not only fun, but absolutely urgent. I mean, I don't want to understate that. Like the whole point of this is to train people to do environmental restoration work. And especially in an era of climate change, we really need a lot more help with that.
Definitely sounds like a really great value. You won't even have to take out a loan for it, go into debt for it, and it's offered remotely too, so do the comfort of your home, and amazing connections to a lot of great experts.
Yeah. Yep. And the nice thing about this program in the context of the pandemic is, I do, as I mentioned before, I do a ton of outdoor volunteer work anyway, and I haven't stopped or slowed down at all during the pandemic because, if you're working in the woods, you're socially distanced by definition. If you're out there planting trees or, again, when I do work in Maryland, I'm often going and like taking care of tree cages, for example. Like we planted this one place 600 or 700 trees, put cages around them to protect them from the deer. But now the deer are not getting the trees, the invasives are getting the trees. So you have to go back, every few months, you have to go back to these tree cages and cut all the invasive vines off of them. And, I go down there and I might have 1,000 acres of forest to myself. So one of the beauties of this project is that many of you know that during the pandemic, people have been going outdoors much more because there's so many fewer indoor things to do. And so what this program allows you to do is get trained so that when you're going outdoors, you may not just be going for a hike, you may be going on a hike with, some clippers in your back pocket, and you're going out looking for, Japanese honeysuckle. And when you see it, you're going to cut it off the trees. So it's tailor-made for a global. I never would have thought to say this, but it's tailor-made for a global pandemic, because you want to be outside anyway. This teaches you so much more about the way that the outdoors actually functions, and on top of that, you get to give back and actually do some beneficial work.
No, those are some really great points. So when is the next cohort? You mentioned that you just have to look at the website. That's right.
Yeah, there's no date specifically set up yet, but I would say probably, if I had to bet, it'll be sometime between April and June or so, depending on how this pandemic unfolds. Once the pandemic goes by, this will be like everything else, be a lot easier. But I would say it's going to take us another couple of months to get through the current cohort, and once that's wrapped up, we'll start at least one more. And again, it might end up being that we teach 3 sections of it. Maybe we're going to teach one at Ashland Nature Center, one in Newark, and one in Lewis, or something. We're planning on having centers of the training all over the state, or at least, let's say, 3 different places in the state, so everybody can get to it pretty easily.
That sounds like a lot of considerations for accessibility and having flexible hours with accommodating different schedules and
right. I mean, so right. So like, if you, again, Delaware benefits from being kind of small in this case. So let's say that, now this is completely theoretical, but let's just say that we're offering it at Ashland Nature Center on Tuesday and Thursday nights, but we're also offering it in Lewis on Saturday mornings. If you live halfway between, you can decide which of those 2 things you want to do, depending on whether it works for you at that time or not. That is entirely hypothetical. Don't quote me on any of that, because we haven't set it up. But the goal is to have it offered in different places at different times, so people can take it when it is most useful for them. This does require a lot of planning, and so far we've been very successful offering it in the context of a pandemic. So it's working well now. It's going to work that much better once we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Excellent. Well, we're really glad to hear about more of the work you're doing with this. And I think that wraps up some of the more formal questions we had. We can open it up to any more questions that anyone either in the live stream on Facebook or in the Zoom has. Feel free to type that in the chat.
Well, I see Ed Crew, who's a Master Naturalist intern at the Ashland Nature Center, has just said that if anybody wants to hear from him, he'd like to throw in a couple words. Ed, do you want to say something? You're not coming through, Ed. I don't know if you're trying to speak, but you're not coming through.
Is that a little better?
That's better, yeah.
So some of the questions you were asking Mckay about the program during the pandemic are really relevant to me, because I went through the program last summer, sponsored by Ashland Nature Center.
Ed, your audio is really kind of messed up. It's not coming through. While he's trying to figure that out, let me answer a question from Jill. Jill says, can you go from one location to the other? So if you're in Rehoboth on weekends and Wilmington through the week. Jill, that's a really good question, but also my answer is going to only be hypothetical, because I don't know the answer to that. You're assuming, and I hope it's true, that there will be multiple courses running simultaneously. Like in Maryland, again, sorry to keep bringing this up, but Maryland has been established for like 10 years now. So if you can't make the geology lecture in one place, you can go to the geology lecture in another place. That's true in Maryland. Theoretically, it'll be true in Delaware as well.
Ed, any luck getting back with that audio?
I'm not sure, so you'd have to tell me if you can actually hear me or not.
Anybody else have any questions?
Hi, do you only want questions on chat?
No, Judy, go ahead. Ask a question. on webcam.
Okay, thanks. So I'm part of a UDEL program called Lifelong Learning,
Yes.
and it's very likely we'll have some folks that are interested in taking this this course, but it's more likely that we have people that will say, "Oh, I want to help do the work." That's a more likely scenario for us, and so I'm wondering what my best way of working on that would be. Like, do I contact like Ashland Nature Center, or do I contact a person that's suggested as the Master Naturalist? And we have a whole program that's starting this month, and we're looking for some speakers, and we're an action-oriented group. So this is definitely, we've been studying Ptolemy and preparing our own gardens and everything. So it's right in our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure how to get connected, and certainly I would share information that I'm hearing today.
Well, Judy, I have spoken to Lifelong Learning many, many times, and would be happy to do so again. It's a great community of people, as you say, who are very energetic and very committed to this sort of work. I think if I can repeat your question, I think you're asking, can people do the work without doing the training? And the answer is definitely yes. They can go to any nature center, any, Mount Cuba, DNS. They can go to Abbott's Mill. They can go to really wherever people want to do work, and just ask people who are
Okay.
there, and they will put you to work. The Master Naturalist training, what it gets you is a lot more expertise, and then these different places will be more inclined to let you, for example, lead a project. Like if you, again, I keep going back to the thing that I'm most interested in, which is reforestation work. If you've been trained as a Master Naturalist and they want to plant 1,000 trees in a weekend, and they leave it up to you to figure out what to do, you're not going to put in the wrong trees. You're going to know what the right trees are. So all these places like to have some trained people on hand to kind of direct, the other volunteers. I can tell you from lots of experience that when you open things up to volunteers, you can get a lot of people in there that are very enthusiastic but don't really know what they're doing, especially if you happen to be teenagers, for example. So you can, give teenagers a bunch of sharp objects and send them into the woods, and they're going to end up cutting their own fingers off, and you don't want that to happen. So yes, volunteer wherever you can, whenever possible. But if you can get the training, you're that much more valuable to the people organizing the experiences. That's
okay. And if we would like somebody to come talk to our group about the Master Naturalist program, can I arrange that? Who would I try to arrange that with?
You can send me an email, or you can send Blake Moore an email. I mean, we're in contact multiple times a week. We'll get somebody to talk to you, no problem.
Thank you. And is your email part of this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
chat?
I'll put it in the chat right here.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Oops, I didn't mean that. I sent that to Ed. Let me put it in the thing to everybody.
And just for your information, we're the Ecology Action Team at Ollie, at Lifelong Learning in Wilmington.
I mean, I've given talks up in Wilmington probably 10 or 15 times. So
Wow, that's cool. Yeah.
No problem. Anybody else?
We did have a question from Jill. She asked, what does the syllabus look like?
Thanks for the question, Jill. The syllabus very intentionally follows the book. So the book has 14 chapters. They're not exactly 14 classes. They're, the class, well, the way we've taught it so far is the classes often last 2 or 3 hours long, and usually one person will come in and do, like I'll give a talk for an hour on environmental history in Delaware, And then my colleague Sue Barton will come in and do an hour on plant and soil science for an hour. So usually the syllabus essentially follows the chapters in the book step by step, because they're kind of outlined in a fairly logical manner. Unless there's no reason for amphibians to come before plants, but sometimes we'll flip flop things like that. But it's really, the course is intentionally designed to follow the course of the book, basically. And I would never dissuade people from taking the course, but if you get the book and read the book, you're going to learn a great deal from the book. The nice thing about the course is that the book plus the lectures plus the field work is a really great way to cement your training.
And we can take any last questions now.
Well, thanks for your questions, and I hope you all will get in touch if anybody wants to hear more. And definitely look at the website for the program and see when you can take it. And I hope to see you out there doing some good work.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. And I'll just put that website here again. So if you're really itching to get out there and take the course, just keep checking that page for when the course is going to become available. And I'll also link to that fabulous book, Get It for Everyone You Know and Love. If you're not able to take the course, reading the book is still really valuable. And thanks so much for joining us, Mckay Jenkins. We really appreciate your time and expertise.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody out there.
Thanks.
Okay, guys, take care. See you around.